"You're not leaving me broke." Mafia boss stopped the maid's $5 gift and dragged her back to him. The skyline of Eastbridge, New York State, was a jagged row of iron and glass that looked like broken teeth against the gray November sky. It was a city built on steel mills and old money, but in recent decades, it had become a playground for shadows. Rising above the grit like a diamond in a coal chute was DeLuca Tower. It was 60 stories of pristine limestone and privacy, a fortress for the wealthy who wanted to look down on the city without smelling the smog. Eva Morales knew the smell of the city well enough. It clung to her cheap woolen coat and settled into the cracks of the pavement outside the bus stop, where she waited every morning at 5 o'clock. But inside the tower, on the penthouse floor, the air smelled only of expensive leather, white tea, and the sharp chemical tang of the industrial cleaner she used to scrub floors that cost more than her mother's entire life earnings. Eva was in her mid-20s, though the dark circles beneath her eyes often made her look older. Her hands, raw from harsh detergents and dry winter air, moved with a practiced rhythm as she wiped down the black marble countertop of the master bathroom. This was her second job of the day. Her first was at a diner across town where the tips were measured in quarters. Here, in the silence of the penthouse, the money was steady, but the cost was invisible. This apartment belonged to Nico DeLuca, to the public. Nico was a logistics magnate, the 30-something heir to a shipping empire that moved cargo up and down the East Coast. To the people who lived in the cramped, peeling apartment blocks of Eastbridge, the name DeLuca meant something else entirely. It meant protection, fear, and a silence that fell over a room whenever he walked in. Eva tried to make herself invisible. That was the rule of the cleaning staff. Be a ghost, do the work, leave no trace, and never, ever see anything you were not supposed to see. She heard the front door beep and unlock. Eva froze, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. It was barely 7 in the evening. Mr. DeLuca was not supposed to be home for another 3 hours. She quickly gathered her spray bottles and rags, intending to slip out the service entrance before he saw her, but she was too slow. Nico DeLuca walked into the kitchen, loosening his silk tie with one hand while the other held a tumbler of amber liquid. He was a striking man, terrifyingly so. He had the kind of face that belonged on Roman coins, sharp-jawed and stoic, with dark eyes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. He wore suits that were tailored to perfection, hiding the lethality of the muscle beneath. He stopped when he saw her. Eva lowered her gaze immediately, focusing on the shine of his Italian leather shoes. "I apologize." "Mr. DeLuca," Eva said, her voice steady despite her nerves. "I was just finishing the counters. I will be out of your way in a moment." Nico did not move. He watched her, his expression unreadable. Most men in his position looked through the help as if they were furniture. Nico looked at her. He really looked at her, with a weight that made the skin on the back of her neck prickle. "Take your time," he said. His voice was a deep baritone, smooth like gravel tumbling in a riverbed. "It is raining out there." Eva risked a glance at the floor-to-ceiling windows. The rain was indeed lashing against the glass, blurring the city lights into streaks of neon and gray. "I have an umbrella," she said softly, moving toward the utility closet. Nico set his glass down on the counter she had just polished. He did not seem to care about the water ring. "My driver is downstairs," he said. "He will take you home." "No, thank you, sir," Eva replied, her grip tightening on her bucket. "The bus is fine." Nico turned his head slightly, catching her eyes before she could look away. It was not a suggestion. Eva swallowed hard. She knew better than to argue with a man who could shut down a city block with a phone call. 10 minutes later, she was sitting in the back of a black sedan that smelled of cedar and new car leather, watching the rain streak the tinted windows while Nico's silent driver navigated the potholes of her neighborhood. It was not the first time he had done something like this. Over the past 6 months, there had been small cracks in his icy demeanor. There was the time he had found her eating a stale sandwich in the break room and had wordlessly ordered a 3-course meal from the restaurant downstairs delivered to her, claiming it was leftovers from a meeting that never happened. There was the time she had seen him in the lobby, crouching down to scratch behind the ears of the building's mangy stray cat, his face softening into something that looked almost human, almost lonely, and he had looked up, caught her watching him, and the mask had slammed back into place instantly, but she had seen it. And then there was the $20. A week ago. She had found a crisp $20 bill tucked into her cleaning cart. It was not a tip left on a table. It was hidden inside her supply box. When she saw him later that evening, she had walked up to him, her spine stiff with pride, and held it out. "You dropped this, Mr. DeLuca," she had said, her chin high. He had looked at the money, then at her worn shoes, then back at her face. "It is not mine," he had lied smoothly. "I do not take charity," Eva had said, placing the bill on the table beside him. "I work for what I have." He had looked annoyed, perhaps even impressed, but he had taken the money back. Since then, the air between them had been thick with something unspoken. It was not quite friendship, and it was certainly not romance, but it was a tension that hummed like a live wire. But tension did not pay the bills. That night, Eva sat at her small kitchen table in the apartment she shared with her mother and her teenage brother, Marco. The walls were thin, and the radiator clanked like a dying engine. She spread out her cash tips and her paycheck stub, counting the numbers over and over again. If she worked double shifts for 2 more weeks, she would have enough. Just enough. She had a plan. There was a town 3 hours north, a quiet place with no high-rises and no DeLuca family. Rent was cheap. She could start her own small cleaning service, be her own boss, and get Marco away from the influences of the city streets. Marco walked in then, tossing his backpack on the sagging sofa. He was 17, lanky and sullen, with the restless energy of a boy trying to be a man too soon. "You are home late," Eva said, not looking up from her calculations. "Library," Marco muttered, heading for the fridge. Eva looked up then. She saw the bruise blooming on his jawline, poorly hidden by the hood of his sweatshirt. Her stomach dropped. "Marco," she said sharply. He flinched. "It is nothing, Eva. Just basketball." Eva stood up and walked over to him, turning his face to the light. That was not a basketball injury. That was a fist. "Who did this?" she demanded. Marco pulled away, his eyes shifting around the room. "It does not matter. I handled it. You did not handle anything, Marco." "Who was it?" He slumped against the counter, the fight draining out of him. "It is the guys from the chaotic side of town, the Rossi crew." The blood drained from Eva's face. The Rossi family were rivals to the DeLucas. They were younger, messier, and far more vicious. If the DeLucas were a precision airstrike, the Rossis were a pipe bomb in a crowded room. "I borrowed a little money," Marco whispered, "just to get some new sneakers and a jacket. I thought I could win it back playing cards." "How much?" Eva asked, her voice trembling. $2,000, but with the interest, they say it is $5,000 now. $5,000. It might as well have been $1 million. Eva felt the room spin. Her escape fund, the money she had scraped together dollar by dollar, was barely half that. "I will fix it," Marco said weakly. "No," Eva said, her voice hard. "You will stay inside. You go to school and you come home. Do not speak to anyone. I will get the money." She did not know how, but she knew she had to. And she knew one thing for certain. She could not stay at DeLuca Tower. If the Rossi crew found out the sister of their debtor worked for Nico DeLuca, they would use her. They would force her to steal, to spy, or worse. She had to vanish. The next few days passed in a blur of exhaustion. Eva picked up extra shifts at the diner, sleeping 4 hours a night at the tower. She kept her head down, avoiding Nico at all costs. She felt like a wire pulled so tight it was about to snap. The breaking point came on a Thursday. It was late, nearly midnight. Eva was doing a final sweep of the penthouse hallway. The floor was quiet, the only sound the hum of the elevator. She turned the corner toward Nico's private office and stopped dead. Nico was standing outside his office door. His jacket was off, his white dress shirt rolled up to the elbows. But it was the wall that caught her attention. There was a smear of red on the pristine cream wallpaper. It was distinct, jagged, and unmistakably blood. Nico was wiping his own knuckles with a handkerchief. He looked up and saw her. For a second, time stopped. Eva's breath caught in her throat. She saw the redness on his knuckles, the darkness in his eyes, and the smudge on the wall. In that moment, the luxury and the quiet crumbled, revealing the violence that paid for it all. Nico did not move toward her, but his body tensed. "Go home, Eva," he said, his voice low and dangerous. Eva's hands shook as she gripped her mop handle. She should run. She should turn around and flee to the elevator. But survival instinct kicked in, the kind that came from growing up in Eastbridge. She forced a smile. It felt brittle and fake on her face. "I did not see anything, Mr. DeLuca. I was just checking the baseboards." She walked past him, her heart hammering so hard she thought it would bruise her ribs. She pulled a rag from her pocket, sprayed it with cleaner, and wiped the spot on the wall. She scrubbed until the red was gone, until the wallpaper was perfect again. She did not look at him. She could feel his eyes on her, burning into the side of her face. She finished, dropped the rag into her bin, and turned to leave. "Good night, Mr. DeLuca," she said. Nico did not answer. He watched her walk away, his jaw tight. He saw the tremor in her hands. He knew that she was terrified. Eva got into the elevator and pressed the button for the lobby. As soon as the doors closed, she collapsed against the metal wall, gasping for air. She could not do this. She could not be part of this world. She had to leave. Now. The next morning. Eva walked into the building manager's office. "Mister?" Kaplan looked up from his paperwork, surprised. "I am resigning," Eva said, placing her uniform badge on his desk. "Resigning?" Kaplan frowned. "You are our best girl. Eva, Mr. DeLuca specifically asks for you. I have a better opportunity." She lied, her voice steady. "Out of town." "My cousin in Ohio has a job for me." She needed to lie. If they knew she was staying in Eastbridge to pay off a debt to the Rossies, they would never let her go. Or worse, they would get involved. "I can finish out the week," Eva said, "but that is it." Kaplan sighed and accepted the badge. "Fine. But you are making a mistake. Morales, you won't find pay like this in Ohio." Eva left the office, feeling a weight lift off her shoulders, only to be replaced by the crushing reality of the $5,000 she still needed. She would figure it out. She had to. Later that afternoon, Nico was walking through the lobby when he heard Kaplan talking to the head of security. "Shame about the Morales girl," Kaplan was saying. "Good workers are hard to find." Nico stopped. "What about her?" Kaplan jumped, startled. "Oh, Mr. DeLuca. Eva Morales. She put in her notice today, leaving town. Apparently, said she is gone for good after her shift tonight." Nico felt a strange, cold sensation in his chest. Leaving? She'd not said a word to him. After the rides, the food, the silence they had shared, she was just going to vanish? He frowned, acknowledging Kaplan with a sharp nod, and headed for the elevator. He told himself it did not matter. She was a maid. Staff came and went, but the thought of her walking out of the building and never coming back gnawed at him. It felt like a loose thread in a perfectly tailored suit. Eva finished her final shift in the penthouse. The apartment was empty. Nico was out at a meeting. She cleaned with a heavy heart, saying a silent goodbye to the view, to the quiet, to the strange man who lived here. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, white envelope. Inside was a $5 bill. It was wrinkled and soft from being in her pocket all day. It was all she could spare. Every other cent she had was going to the Rossi debt, but she could not leave without settling the score. She remembered the rides home in the rain. She remembered the gourmet food he had pretended was leftovers. She would not be a charity case. She would not be another person taking from him. She took a pen and wrote on the front of the envelope, "For the rides and the food, thank you. Mr. DeLuca, Eva." She placed it on the kitchen island, right where he would see it. It looked pathetic sitting there, a single, crumpled bill against the expanse of marble. But it was her pride. It was her saying that she was his equal, not his dependent. She grabbed her worn duffel bag and her suitcase from the staff locker room. She did not want to wait for the elevator, so she took the stairs down to the lobby, slipping out the side exit to avoid the doorman. Nico returned 20 minutes later. The apartment was silent. He walked into the kitchen, pouring himself a glass of water, and saw the envelope. He picked it up. He read the note. He opened it and pulled out the $5 bill. Nico stared at the money. $5. A flush of heat climbed up his neck. It was not anger. Exactly. It was something sharper. It was insult. She thought that was what it was worth. The nights he had made sure she got home safe, the food he had ordered specifically because he noticed she looked too thin, the quiet moments where he had let his guard down just enough to breathe. $5. She was paying him off like a cab driver. She was reducing everything unspoken between them to a transaction. A cheap transaction. He crushed the bill in his fist. The audacity of it, the absolute infuriating pride of the woman. She was leaving. She was running away to some cornfield in Ohio, thinking she could just toss a crumpled bill at him and wipe the slate clean. Nico slammed the glass down on the counter, hard enough that water sloshed over the rim. He turned on his heel and marched to the elevator. He punched the button for the garage, his jaw set in a line of granite. She was not gone yet. Eva was struggling with her suitcase in the rear parking lot. One of the wheels was broken, dragging against the wet asphalt with a rhythmic scraping sound. The rain had started again, a cold drizzle that plastered her hair to her forehead. She was tired, her bones ached, but she was free. She just had to get to the bus station, get her family, and hide until she could pay the Rossies. She heard the heavy steel door of the building bang open behind her. She did not look back. She kept walking, dragging the heavy bag. "Eva!" The voice was a command, not a question. It echoed off the concrete walls of the parking structure. Eva froze. She closed her eyes for a second, gathering her strength, then turned around. Nico was storming toward her. He was not wearing a coat, just his suit, the rain already darkening the shoulders. He looked furious. He looked terrifying, and he looked beautiful. "Mr. DeLuca," Eva said, gripping the handle of her suitcase. "I am sorry. I was just—" He reached her in 3 long strides. He did not stop until he was invading her space, towering over her. He held up the crumpled $5 bill. "What is this?" Eva lifted her chin. "It is for the rides. And the dinners. I wanted to pay you back." "Pay me back?" Nico laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "You think this pays me back?" "It is what I have," Eva said defensively. "I did not want to owe you anything. You think we are a transaction?" Nico stepped closer. He dropped the bill into a puddle at their feet. It soaked up the dirty water instantly. "You think you can price what happens in that tower? You think you can put a price on my time? I am quitting." "Mr. DeLuca," Eva said, her voice shaking. "I have the right to leave. You are running," he corrected. "You are running away, and you are trying to insult me on the way out so you feel better about it. I am not trying to insult you. I am trying to keep my dignity." "Dignity?" Nico grabbed her wrist. His grip was firm, his fingers warm against her cold skin. It was not violent, but it was possessive. It was an anchor. "You are not leaving me broke for $5. Eva," he growled, his voice dropping to a rough whisper that vibrated in her chest. Eva tried to pull her arm back, but he held fast. "I have to go. Nico, please." He ignored her plea. He pulled her toward him, just an inch. But it shifted the entire world. He looked down at her, his dark eyes searching her face, seeing the fear, the exhaustion, and the desperation she tried so hard to hide. "You are not going to Ohio," he said. "You are in trouble. I can see it in your eyes. You are terrified. I am fine." Eva lied, tears pricking the corners of her eyes. "You are a terrible liar," Nico said. He turned, pulling her with him back toward the building. "You are coming with me." "No." Eva planted her feet, but she was no match for him. "I cannot go back there. I quit." "You can quit cleaning the floors," Nico said, not slowing down. "But you are not quitting me. Not like this." He dragged her suitcase with his free hand, ignoring her protests as he marched her back toward the warmth of the lobby. Eva stumbled after him, her heart racing. She was furious, she was scared, and she was trapped. But as his hand tightened around her wrist, pulling her out of the rain and back into his world, a treacherous part of her mind whispered that for the first time in her life, someone was refusing to let her go. Nico pulled her through the heavy doors, the warmth of the building hitting them like a physical wall. He did not look at the doorman, did not look at the camera. He just kept walking toward the elevator. Eva in tow. "Let go of me," Eva hissed, though the fight was draining out of her. "Not a chance," Nico said, pressing the button for the penthouse. The elevator doors slid open. He pulled her inside as the doors closed, shutting out the rest of the world. Nico finally released her wrist. He leaned back against the paneled wall, watching her, his chest rising and falling with the intensity of the moment. Eva rubbed her wrist, staring at him. "You cannot just kidnap me, Mr. DeLuca." "I am not kidnapping you," Nico said, smoothing his wet lapels. "I am renegotiating your contract." The elevator began to rise, carrying them up into the sky, away from the wet pavement and the $5 bill lying in the puddle. Forgotten. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime that sounded far too polite for the tension thick in the air. Nico DeLuca stepped out first, his grip on Eva's suitcase handle unyielding. He did not look back to see if she was following. He knew she was. There was nowhere else for her to go. They were on the top floor, his sanctuary. The hallway was lined with dark mahogany and muted sconces that cast long shadows against the silk wallpaper. At the end of the hall stood the double doors to his private office. Two men in dark suits, standing guard like statues, straightened immediately as Nico approached. "Leave us," Nico commanded, his voice rougher than usual. The guards exchanged a brief, confused glance. Eva was soaking wet, her hair plastered to her skull, shivering in her cheap coat, but they nodded and vanished down the service corridor without a word. Nico pushed the office doors open and strode inside, dropping Eva's suitcase onto the Persian rug with a heavy thud. The room was vast, dominated by a massive desk of carved ebony and a wall of glass that looked out over the rain-swept city. Thunder rattled the panes, a low growl that matched the mood in the room. Eva stood in the doorway, water dripping from the hem of her coat onto the pristine floor. She hugged her arms around herself, not from cold, but from a desperate need to hold herself together. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "Close the door," Nico said. He walked behind his desk, not sitting, but leaning against the edge of it, his ankles crossed, watching her. Eva hesitated, then pushed the heavy door shut. The click of the latch sounded like a prison lock. She turned to face him, lifting her chin. She refused to cower. She had spent her whole life scrubbing floors for men like him. She would not let him see her tremble. "I am not staying," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "You cannot keep me here. I have a bus to catch." Nico let out a short, sharp laugh. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the wet, crumpled $5 bill he had retrieved from the puddle. He smoothed it out on the polished surface of his desk, the damp paper leaving a dark smear on the wood. "You were leaving this," he said, his finger tapping the face of Lincoln. "A tip, a refund." "It was a repayment," Eva corrected, stepping further into the room. Her cheap sneakers squeaked on the hardwood, for the food, for the rides. "I do not take handouts, Mr. DeLuca. I pay for what I use." Nico stared at her, his dark eyes narrowing. "You think that is what this was? A transaction? You think I had my driver wait 40 minutes in the rain for you because I was running a taxi service? You think I ordered sea bass and risotto because I had too much food? I do not know why you did it," Eva snapped, her cheeks flushing with heat despite the chill in her clothes. "Maybe it makes you feel benevolent, the great Nico DeLuca, throwing scraps to the help, but I am not a stray cat you can feed when you are bored. I am a person, and I am leaving." She turned for the suitcase, but Nico moved faster than a man of his size should be able to. He was there in 2 strides, blocking her path to the luggage. He did not touch her, but his presence was a wall she could not breach. "Why?" he demanded, his voice dropping an octave. "Why the rush? Why the secrecy? People quit jobs. Eva, they give 2 weeks' notice. They say goodbye. They do not sneak out the back door and leave $5 on the counter like they are paying for a night in a cheap motel. The comparison stung. Eva flinched, her eyes glossy with sudden, frustrated tears. She looked up at him, anger warring with shame. "Because I cannot stand it," she cried out, the words tearing from her throat. "I cannot stand the way you look at me like you are trying to figure out how much I cost. I cannot stand feeling like I owe you something every time you are nice to me. I will not be bought, Nico. Not by you, not by anyone." Nico went still. The anger in his face shifted, replaced by a dawn of understanding. He looked at her, really looked at her, taking in the exhaustion etched around her eyes, the terror she was trying to mask with anger, and the frantic desperation of her escape. He was a businessman. He dealt in leverage, in debts, in the flow of money and power. And he knew what desperation looked like. It did not look like a woman quitting a job for a better opportunity in Ohio. It looked like a woman running for her life. "This is not about pride," he said slowly. The silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. "This is about money, real money. I do not know what you are talking about," Eva said, looking away, but her pulse jumped in her throat. Nico took a step closer, invading her personal space. He could smell the rain on her skin, mixed with the faint scent of the lemon soap she used. "Your brother," he said. "Marco?" Eva's head snapped up, her eyes wide. "What about him? I saw him 2 weeks ago," Nico said, his tone conversational but his eyes sharp as flint. "Waiting outside the service entrance for you. He had a bruise on his cheek. He tried to hide it, but I saw it. He fell." Eva lied, the words tasting like ash. "He did not fall," Nico countered. "That was a warning. Who is it, Eva? Who has a hook in your family? It is none of your business." "It became my business when you tried to insult me with $5 and run out into a storm," Nico said. He tilted his head, studying her face. "It is the Rossi crew, isn't it?" Eva went pale. The air left her lungs. She did not have to answer. Her reaction was confirmation enough. Nico swore softly in Italian, running a hand through his dark hair. He turned away from her, pacing to the window. The Rossi crew, they were sloppy, violent, and desperate to claw their way up from the gutters. If Marco owed them money, running to Ohio would not save him. They would sell the debt to someone else, or they would find them. "How much?" Nico asked, his back to her. Eva swallowed hard. $5,000. Nico turned around. His face was unreadable. $5,000. You are running for your life over $5,000? It might as well be $5 million to us, Eva shouted, her control finally breaking. "We do not have shipping empires. Mr. DeLuca, we have rent payments and grocery bills. I have saved every penny for months and I am still only halfway there. If we do not pay by Friday, they are going to hurt him. They said they would break his legs. So yes, I am running. I'm taking them somewhere safe where I can work 3 jobs if I have to, but I am not staying here to watch my brother get beaten to death." She was trembling now, violent shudders that had nothing to do with the cold. She wrapped her arms around her waist, looking small and broken in the middle of his opulent office. Nico felt a strange sensation in his chest, a tightening that felt dangerously like protectiveness. He hated it. He hated that she was scared. He hated that she was alone, and most of all, he hated that she had not come to him. He walked back to her, stopping just inches away. The anger was gone from his voice, replaced by a calm, terrifying authority. "You are not going to Ohio," he stated. "I have to—" "No," Nico said. "You do not. I will fix it." Eva laughed, a wet, mirthless sound. "You will fix it? How? You are going to give me the money? And then what? Then I owe you? Then I belong to you instead of them?" Nico's jaw tightened. "I am offering you a job. Eva, a real job. I have a job. I clean your toilets." "Not anymore," Nico said. "I am promoting you. My personal housekeeper, my assistant, you manage the penthouse, you handle my schedule, you keep my life in order. You live here, on the staff floor. It is secure. Keycard access only. No one gets in without my permission." Eva stared at him, shaking her head slowly. "No. Double your current salary," Nico continued, ignoring her refusal, "and I pay off the debt, tonight." Eva felt dizzy. The offer was a lifeline, a golden ticket out of the nightmare she had been living in. But it came with strings, heavy, invisible strings. "And what do you want in return?" she whispered. "Men like you do not give things away for free." "I want you safe," Nico said, the words slipping out before he could filter them. He cleared his throat. Stepping back into his role as the boss, "I want loyalty. I need someone in this house I can trust, someone who does not look at the floor when I speak. You are good at what you do, Eva. And you are honest. You returned $20 you found in a cart. You tried to pay me back for rides I offered freely. That kind of integrity is rare in my world. I cannot live here," Eva said, her voice wavering. "It would be like being a bird in a cage." "A cage is better than a grave," Nico said darkly, "and it is better than a hospital bed for your brother." "He's trying to own me," Eva thought. "He's trying to buy my life. I am not for sale," she said, her voice gaining strength. "I am not buying you," Nico snapped, his patience fraying. "I am hiring you. There is a difference." "Is there?" Eva challenged. She stepped toward him, fueled by adrenaline and fear. She stood tall, her chest heaving, looking him dead in the eye. "If I take your money, if I live under your roof, I am yours. I answer to you. I depend on you. That is not a job, Nico. That is ownership. And I would rather starve than be owned." The air in the room crackled. They were standing toe to toe, the heat of their argument burning away the chill of the rain. Nico stared down at her, his eyes burning with a complex mix of frustration, anger, and something softer, something that terrified him. He took a step closer. There was no space left between them. He reached out, his hand closing around her wrist again. It was not a restraint this time. It was a tether. "I do not want to own you, Eva," he said, his voice dropping to a rough whisper that sent a shiver down her spine. "Then let me go," she breathed, looking up at his mouth. "I cannot," he admitted. "Why?" "Because," Nico murmured, his thumb brushing the delicate skin of her inner wrist, feeling her pulse flutter against his skin. "I do not want you to disappear from my life for the price of a cup of coffee." The world narrowed down to the two of them. The sound of the rain faded. Eva could feel the heat radiating from his body, could smell the cedar and expensive scotch on his breath. Their breathing synced, a ragged rhythm in the quiet room. Nico lowered his head slightly. His gaze dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes. The hunger in his expression was naked, raw. He wanted to kiss her. He wanted to pull her wet, shivering body against his, and prove that this, whatever this was worth more than $5. Eva's lips parted. Her heart screamed at her to lean in. For a second, she swayed toward him, drawn by the gravity of the man. But the fear was still there. The pride was still there. She jerked her wrist back, breaking the contact. She stumbled back a step, her breath coming in gasps. "No," she whispered. I cannot." Nico stayed where he was, his hand suspended in the air for a moment before he dropped it to his side. He took a deep breath, composing himself, masking the vulnerability that had just slipped through. "Fine," he said, his voice cool again. "But the offer stands. You take the job. You live here. I clear the debt." Eva wrapped her arms around herself again. She thought of Marco's bruised face. She thought of the long, dark bus ride to Ohio with no money and no plan. She looked at Nico, who stood like a fortress against the storm. "I have conditions," she said quietly. "Name them. I want my own room, with a lock. Done. I want my own bank account. My money is mine. You do not touch it. Agreed. And," she paused, taking a steadying breath, "when the debt is cleared, when I have saved enough, I am free to go. If I want to leave, you do not stop me. You do not chase me." Nico clenched his jaw. The thought of her leaving, even in the hypothetical future, grated on him. But he needed her to stay now. He needed her safe. Agreed. He lied. He would agree to the words, but he knew, with the certainty of a man who always got what he wanted, that by the time the debt was cleared, he would find a reason to make her want to stay. He would not let her go so easily. "Get your things," Nico said, turning back to his desk to hide the triumph in his eyes. "We are going to get your family." The ride to Eva's apartment was silent. Nico drove this time, his black SUV cutting through the flooded streets like a shark. His bodyguard, Rafe, sat in the back, a silent shadow cleaning his fingernails with a small knife. Eva sat in the passenger seat, watching the familiar, crumbling neighborhood roll by. They pulled up to the tenement building where she lived. It was a brownstone that had seen better days 50 years ago. Now, the stoop was cracked, and the streetlights were broken. "Wait here," Nico said to Eva as he killed the engine. "I am coming," Eva said, unbuckling her seatbelt. "It is my home. My mother is there." Nico looked like he wanted to argue, but he nodded once. "Stay behind me." They climbed the 3 flights of stairs, the smell of old cooking oil and damp plaster heavy in the air. When they reached the 3rd floor, Eva stopped. Her door was ajar. "Marco?" she called out, panic spiking in her voice. "Mama?" She pushed past Nico, rushing into the apartment. It was empty. The cheap furniture was overturned, cushions were slashed, the small television was gone. "Mama," Eva screamed, running into the bedroom. Empty. She ran to the kitchen. There was no one there, but on the small, wobbling table, held down by a kitchen knife stabbed into the wood, was a piece of paper. Eva grabbed it, her hands shaking so hard she ripped the corner. 2 days, Morales, or we take payment in blood. Tell Marco we are watching." Eva let out a choked sob, the paper fluttering from her fingers. They had been here. They had been in her home. If her mother and Marco had been here, "They are gone," she whispered, terror seizing her chest. "They took them." "No," Nico said from behind her. He was holding his phone, his voice calm and authoritative. He was already making calls. He hung up and looked at her. "My men were watching the building. Your mother and brother left an hour ago. They are at the diner down the street. They are safe." Eva sagged against the counter, relief washing over her so intensely her knees buckled. Nico was there instantly, his hand catching her elbow to steady her. "Look at this," Nico said, his voice hard. He pulled the knife from the table and read the note. His face darkened, a muscle feathered in his jaw. "This is Rossi," he muttered. Eva was trembling uncontrollably now. The reality of it, the violence, the invasion, crashed down on her. Nowhere was safe. Her sanctuary was violated. "I cannot stay here," she wept, covering her face with her hands. "We have nowhere to go." Nico stepped in close behind her. He did not hug her. She was too fragile, too scared, but he placed his large, warm hand on the small of her back. It was a gesture of support, a physical promise. He leaned down, his mouth close to her ear. His voice was a low rumble, vibrating through her spine. "No one touches your family while you are with me," he vowed. Eva stiffened at the intimacy, the heat of his body pressing against her back. It was overwhelming. It was too much. But she did not move away. She leaned back, just a fraction, accepting his strength because she had none left of her own. "Pack what you need," Nico commanded gently. "We are leaving. Now." 2 hours later, the world had shifted on its axis. Rafe had escorted Marco and Mrs. Morales to a secure apartment complex on the west side of the city, a building owned by DeLuca Real Estate, with doormen who were really retired enforcers. Nico had explained it simply to her mother, a company benefit for a valued employee, Mrs. Morales, frail but sharp, had looked from Nico to Eva with suspicion, but the promise of safety was too strong to refuse. Eva stood in her new room. It was on the staff floor of DeLuca Tower, 2 floors below the penthouse. It was small, but compared to her old bedroom, it was a palace. The bed was queen-sized with crisp white linens. There was a private bathroom with marble tiles. A large window looked out over the city, offering the same view Nico had, just from a slightly lower angle. She placed her few meager belongings on the dresser, a framed photo of her father, a porcelain angel her mother had given her, and the envelope with the $5 bill. Nico had given it back to her in the car. "Keep it," he had said. "Remind yourself of what you are worth." She did not know if he meant it as a compliment or a warning. Eva sat on the edge of the bed. The room was silent. It smelled of lavender and safety. She was safe. Her mother was safe. Marco was safe. The debt would be paid in the morning. But as she looked at the heavy oak door, she heard the electronic click of the lock engaging. She was safe, yes, but she was also kept. She had traded the wolves at the door for the dragon in the tower. She lay back on the expensive sheets, staring at the ceiling. She felt a complicated knot of emotions in her chest: gratitude for the safety, resentment for the power he held over her, and beneath it all, a lingering heat where his hand had touched the small of her back, and the memory of his eyes on her lips. She was trapped. But for the first time in years, she closed her eyes and slept without fear of what the morning would bring. Winter descended on Eastbridge with a heavy, iron-gray permanence. The wind whipped off the river, rattling the windows of the tenements in the lower city, but up in the penthouse of DeLuca Tower, the season was nothing more than a scenic backdrop of swirling white flakes against thick, soundproof glass. 3 weeks had passed since Eva Morales had moved into the staff quarters on the 58th floor. Her life had settled into a rhythm that was both terrifyingly precarious and strangely domestic. She was no longer just a ghost wiping down counters. She was the gatekeeper of Nico DeLuca's private world. She managed his schedule, ensuring his meetings with logistics partners did not overlap with his meetings with the captains of the local families. She organized his wardrobe, lining up his charcoal suits and pressing his silk ties until they looked like ribbons of liquid steel. And late at night, when the city below was a grid of amber lights, she brought him black coffee while he pored over ledgers that she knew better than to read. It was in these quiet hours that she began to see the man behind the myth. Nico was disciplined to the point of obsession. He woke at 4 a.m. to train in his private gym, punishing a heavy bag with a violence that shook the room. Yet, he had a softness that confused her. One Tuesday morning, she watched from the balcony as he stopped in the courtyard to speak with Mr. Henderson, the building's 80-year-old gardener. Nico, the man who could order a hit with a nod, stood there for 20 minutes, laughing at the old man's stories about his hydrangeas, his posture relaxed, his smile genuine and boyish. But the duality of his life was a blade that cut both ways. That same evening, the atmosphere in the penthouse shifted. The air grew heavy, charged with ozone and violence. 2 men had been dragged into Nico's office, associates who had been skimming from the dock payroll. Eva had been ordered to stay in her room. But the walls of the staff quarters were not thick enough to block out the muffled shouting. Then came the sound, a single, deafening crack, a gunshot. Silence followed, heavy, suffocating silence. 20 minutes later, Nico knocked on her door. When she opened it, he was standing in the hallway, his jacket off, his sleeves rolled up. He looked exhausted, his eyes dark pits of nothingness. "I need you to clean the office," he said. His voice was flat, devoid of the warmth he had shown the gardener that morning. Eva did not ask questions. She grabbed her bucket and her bleach. When she entered the office, the men were gone. Dragged out down the freight elevator, she assumed, but the marble floor near the desk was slick with red. She scrubbed. She got on her hands and knees, the smell of copper filling her nose, and she scrubbed until the water in her bucket turned pink, then dark red. She scrubbed until her hands were raw. When she looked up, she saw Nico standing by the window. Staring out at the city, he ruled. He held a glass of whiskey in a hand that did not tremble, but the slump of his shoulders betrayed a profound, isolated sadness. He looked like a king sitting on a throne of bones, wondering if any of it was worth it. Eva finished, poured the water down the drain, and went to bed. She did not sleep. She lay awake, listening to the wind, understanding now that the safety he promised her came at a blood price. The weather turned violent a week later. A nor'easter slammed into the coast, burying Eastbridge in snow and ice. The wind howled like a wounded animal, tearing down power lines across the county. Eva had been out running an errand for Nico, picking up a specific blend of tea he liked from a shop in the city center, when the storm intensified. By the time the town car dropped her back at the tower, she was soaked to the bone, her coat heavy with freezing rain. She made it to the penthouse elevator just as the grid failed. The lights flickered and died. The hum of the ventilation system cut out, plunging the building into a sudden, ringing silence. The emergency lights kicked on a moment later, bathing the hallway in an eerie, sickly yellow glow. Eva shivered, hugging her wet coat around herself. The heating system had gone down with the power. The chill of the storm began to seep through the glass walls. She fumbled for her keycard, her fingers numb and clumsy. "Is someone there?" Nico's voice came from the darkness of the living room. A beam of white light cut through the gloom, a heavy-duty tactical flashlight. "It is me," Eva called out, her teeth chattering. "I just got back." The beam swung toward her, blinding her for a second, then lowered to the floor. Nico emerged from the shadows behind the light. He was wearing a black cashmere sweater. Blending into the dark, "You are soaked," he stated, closing the distance between them. The rain. It started coming down sideways. Eva stammered. She was shaking violently now, the cold sinking into her marrow. Nico swore softly. He reached out and touched her shoulder. His hand was warm, shockingly so against her freezing coat. "You are going to get hypothermia. Get that coat off." He guided her into the kitchen, where the residual heat from the oven still lingered. He set the flashlight on the counter, pointing it up at the ceiling so it cast a diffused, soft glow around the room. "Take it off," Nico commanded gently. Eva peeled the heavy, sodden wool from her shoulders. Underneath, her uniform, a simple blouse and skirt, was damp and clinging to her skin. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to stop the tremors that racked her frame. "Wait here." Nico disappeared into the dark hallway. He returned a moment later carrying a thick towel and a white dress shirt. "Dry yourself," he said, handing her the towel. Eva buried her face in the plush cotton, rubbing the water from her hair and face. When she lowered the towel, Nico was holding the shirt out to her. It was one of his, crisp, expensive cotton that smelled of cedar and the faint, spicy cologne he wore. "Put this on," he said. "Your clothes are wet." Eva hesitated. It felt intimate, too intimate. But the cold was a physical pain, biting at her skin. She turned her back to him, her fingers fumbling with the buttons of her damp blouse. Her hands were shaking so bad she could not undo the top button. Nico made a frustrated sound in his throat. "Turn around." Eva turned slowly. Nico set the shirt down on the counter. His face was serious, focused solely on the task. He reached out, his large fingers brushing against her collarbone as he deftly undid the button she had struggled with. His knuckles grazed her skin. Fire trailed in their wake. Eva stopped breathing. She looked up at him, watching his eyes as he focused on her hands. He did not look at her body. He looked at the buttons, efficient and clinical. Yet the proximity was overwhelming. He peeled the wet fabric away from her shoulders. Eva shivered, but this time, it was not from the cold. "Arms up," he murmured. She obeyed, slipping out of the damp uniform. Nico immediately draped his dry, warm shirt over her shoulders. It was massive on her, the hem hitting her mid-thigh, the sleeves swallowing her hands. He began to button it up for her, starting from the bottom. As his hands moved up, pulling the fabric closed over her chest, he paused, his gaze lifted, locking with hers, in the dim, reflected light of the flashlight. His eyes were pools of obsidian. He stood so close she could feel the heat radiating from his chest. His fingers lingered on the placket of the shirt, just over her heart, which was beating a frantic rhythm against her ribs. For a moment, neither of them moved. The storm raged outside, battering the glass. But inside, the world had narrowed to the space between them. Nico's gaze dropped to her lips, her breath hitched, shallow and ragged. She gripped the front of the shirt, her knuckles white, pulling him imperceptibly closer. He leaned in. The air between them crackled. Then he blinked. The mask slid back into place. He finished the top button and stepped back, putting a safe distance between them. "Come sit by the window," he said, his voice rough. "The view is better in the dark." They sat on the floor of the living room, wrapped in blankets, watching the lightning illuminate the dead city below. They did not touch. They did not talk about the almost kiss. Instead, Nico asked about her childhood. He asked about her father, who had died when she was 10. He listened as she talked about the smell of her mother's cooking and the way Marco used to laugh before the streets got their claws into him. In return, Nico spoke of his own father, not the Don, but the man who taught him to tie a fishing knot. He spoke of the loneliness of the tower, of being a prince in a castle made of ice. For that one night in the dark, they were not boss and maid. They were just two people hiding from the storm. 2 days later, the power was back, and the walls were back up. Nico found Eva in the library, organizing his correspondence. He dropped a cream-colored envelope on the desk in front of her. "The Ricci Charity Gala is on Saturday." He said, "You are coming." Eva looked at the invitation, embossed with gold leaf. "Me? Why?" "I need an assistant on hand," Nico said, not meeting her eyes, "to manage introductions, ensure I do not get cornered by the press, and to make sure I do not spill red wine on a $5,000 suit." It was a lie. They both knew it. He had men for security. He had publicists for the press. He wanted her there because the gala was a Shark Tank, and for some reason, he refused to examine. He wanted her where he could see her. "I do not have anything to wear to a place like that," Eva said quietly. "Taken care of," Nico replied, turning to leave. "My stylist sent something over. It is in your room." The dress was hanging on the back of her door in a garment bag. When Eva unzipped it, her breath caught. It was black silk, simple in cut but devastating in construction. It had a high neck but a plunging back, and a slit that ran up the left leg. It was elegant, understated, and expensive. On the night of the gala, Eva stepped out of the elevator into the penthouse foyer. Nico was waiting. He was adjusting his cufflinks, looking every inch the king of Eastbridge in a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin. He turned when he heard her heels click on the marble. He stopped. His hands fell to his sides. Eva stood nervously, smoothing the silk over her hips. She wore no jewelry, no makeup other than a touch of red lipstick. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant knot. "Do I look okay?" she asked, her voice small. Nico did not answer immediately. He stared at her, his composure cracking. His gaze swept from the bare curve of her shoulder, down the line of her waist, to the slit in the skirt. He looked like a man who had just discovered that his favorite painting had a hidden layer he had never seen before. "You look—" Nico cleared his throat, forcing the words out. "You look adequate." Eva smiled slightly. Adequate was high praise from Nico DeLuca. He walked over to her and offered his arm, his elbow crooked, waiting. Eva hesitated, then slipped her hand through his arm. Her fingers curled around the expensive fabric of his jacket, feeling the hard muscle of his forearm beneath. "Shall we?" Nico asked. "We shall," Eva replied. The gala was held in the ballroom of the Grand Hotel, a cavernous space dripping with crystal chandeliers and old money. The air smelled of expensive perfume, champagne, and ambition. As they entered, heads turned. The room went quiet for a split second. Then the whispers started. Nico DeLuca walked through the crowd like Moses parting the Red Sea. Eva stuck close to his side, her hand tightening on his arm. She could feel the eyes on her. Judging, assessing. "Who is that with DeLuca?" A woman in emerald satin whispered loud enough for Eva to hear. "Probably just the help," her companion sneered. "Look at the hands, working hands." Eva flinched. She tried to pull her hand away, to put distance between herself and Nico, to retreat into the background where she belonged. Nico clamped his arm down, trapping her hand against his side. He did not look at her, but he leaned his head down, his mouth brushing her ear. "Head up." "Eva," he murmured, his voice a low growl that vibrated through her. "You walk with me. That is all anyone in this room needs to know. If they have a problem with you, they have a problem with me, and no one here is stupid enough to have a problem with me." His warm breath sent a shiver racing down her spine. She straightened her back, lifting her chin. She was with him, but the feeling of safety was short-lived. Near the bar, the crowd thinned, revealing a group of men who looked like predators in fancy suits. In the center stood Luca Rossi. He was younger than Nico, with a smile that showed too many teeth and eyes that looked like dead fish. When he saw Nico, he spread his arms wide. "Nico, Luca called out, his voice oily. "I did not think you came to these things. I thought you were too busy counting your shipping containers. I like to support the community." "Luca," Nico said coolly, "unlike some, who just bleed it dry." Luca's smile faltered, then sharpened. He looked at Eva. His eyes raked over her, undressing her in a way that made her skin crawl. "And who is this lovely creature?" Luca stepped closer. "I did not know you had a new plaything." "She is my staff," Nico said, his voice dropping to 0 Kelvin. "Keep your eyes on your own glass." "Luca, staff?" Luca laughed. "You dress your maids in silk now, or is she payment for something?" Nico took a step forward. The air around them seemed to vanish. Eva felt the violence radiating off him in waves. "Careful," Nico warned softly. Luca raised his hands in mock surrender. "Relax, Nico. Just making conversation. Nice to see you expanding your circle. It is good to have people you care about. Makes life interesting. It gives you something to lose." He winked at Eva, a cold, dead wink. "Tell Marco I said hello. I hear he is enjoying his new apartment. Nice neighborhood. Be a shame if the crime rate went up." Eva stopped breathing. He knew. He knew where they were. He knew about the safe house. Nico's promises of safety suddenly felt like paper walls. Luca laughed again and melted back into the crowd. Eva stood frozen, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm of terror. "He knows," she whispered. "Nico, he knows." Nico turned to her. His face was grim, but his eyes were steady. "He is trying to scare you. That is all he has. Fear. He's going to hurt them." "Not tonight," Nico said firmly. "Tonight. We play the game." He took her hand and pulled her toward the dance floor. "What are you doing?" Eva hissed. "Showing him that I do not care what he says," Nico replied. "If we leave now, we look weak. If we hide, we look scared. We dance." He pulled her into his arms. The music was a slow, mournful waltz. Nico placed one hand on her waist, his grip firm and possessive. He took her other hand in his, interlacing their fingers. "Follow my lead," he instructed. Eva stumbled at first, her legs trembling with fear, but Nico held her up. He moved with surprising grace for a man built like a brawler. He guided her through the steps, his body shielding her from the room. They moved in sync. Eva could feel his heart beating steadily against her chest, a slow, powerful thud that calmed her own racing pulse. She looked up at him. His face was set in a mask of indifference for the crowd, but his eyes were locked on hers. "Do not let him win," Nico whispered. "Do not let him see you bleed." Eva nodded, tightening her grip on his shoulder. She let the music take over. For a few minutes, they were not target and protector, boss and maid. They were just a man and a woman moving together in the light. The heat of his hand on her waist burned through the silk of her dress. The smell of him surrounded her. She felt safe in his arms, despite the wolves watching from the shadows. The ride home was silent. The adrenaline of the confrontation was fading, leaving behind a heavy, suffocating tension. They sat in the back of the town car, separated by a few inches of leather seat. The city lights flashed by, illuminating the cabin in strobes of yellow and red. Eva's knee brushed against Nico's as the car turned a corner. She did not pull away, neither did he. Nico turned to look at her. The shadows played across his face, softening the hard angles. He looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch in her throat. He reached out. His hand hovered for a second, then he gently brushed his thumb across her cheekbone. "You have an eyelash," he murmured. His thumb lingered at her jawline, his skin rough against her softness. He did not pull his hand away. He traced the line of her jaw, his fingers sliding into the hair at the nape of her neck. Eva turned her face into his touch, her eyes fluttering shut. She was so tired of being scared. She was so tired of fighting. In this dark car, with this dangerous man, she felt a pull so strong it terrified her more than Luca Rossi ever could. She leaned in, just an inch. Nico met her halfway. His gaze dropped to her mouth. He wanted to kiss her. She could see it. She could feel it. The air between them was thick enough to choke on. But then the image of Luca's dead eyes flashed in her mind. Be a shame if the crime rate went up. If she crossed this line, there was no going back. If she gave in to this, She would be his weakness, and he would be hers. And in this world, weaknesses got people killed. Eva pulled back. It was a physical wrench, like tearing a bandage off a fresh wound. She pressed her back against the door, her chest heaving. "No," she whispered, her voice breaking. Nico's hand fell to the seat between them. He did not try to grab her. He just watched her, his eyes dark with regret and frustration. "Eva," he started. "Don't," she pleaded. "Please don't. Getting involved with you. It is only going to end in heartbreak. For both of us." Nico stayed silent. He looked out the window at the passing city, his jaw set in stone. "You are wrong," he said softly, almost to himself. "It has already started." The car rolled on through the dark streets, carrying them back to the tower, back to the cage, leaving the unspoken words hanging in the air like smoke. The smell of antiseptic and floor wax was the first thing that hit Eva when the elevator doors opened at St. Jude's Hospital. It was a scent she associated with long nights waiting for her mother's test results. But tonight, the sharp chemical odor carried a different kind of dread. She ran down the corridor, her sneakers squeaking on the linoleum, ignoring the nurse who called out for her to slow down. She found room 304 and shoved the door open. Marco was sitting on the edge of the bed, a nurse wrapping a bandage around his ribs. His face was a map of violence. His left eye was swollen shut, a grotesque purple bulb against his pale skin, and his lip was split wide open. He looked small, terrified, and far too young to be caught in a war between grown men. "Eva," Marco croaked, wincing as he tried to sit up. Eva rushed to him, her hands hovering over his bruised shoulders, afraid to touch him, afraid to cause more pain. "Oh my God, Marco, I am okay," he mumbled, though his voice was thick with pain. They jumped me. 2 blocks from the school." Eva turned to the police officer standing by the window. He was bored, scribbling in a notebook. He did not look like a man interested in justice. He looked like a man filling out paperwork for a lost bicycle. "Who did this?" Eva demanded, though she already knew the answer. "Kids." The officer shrugged. "Gang initiation, probably." "We will file a report. It was not kids," Marco whispered after the officer left. "It was Rossi's guys, the big one. He told me to tell you that the clock ran out. He said next time, I do not walk away." Eva felt the blood drain from her face, replaced instantly by a rush of molten heat. It was a rage so pure and so hot it made her vision blur. Nico had promised. He had looked her in the eye, his hand on her back, and swore that no one would touch her family. He had moved them into his building. He had put guards on the door. And yet, here was her brother, broken and bleeding, because she had trusted a criminal to be a savior. "Get dressed," Eva said, her voice dangerously calm. "We are going home." She took Marco back to the safe house, settled him into bed with pain medication and a glass of water, and waited until her mother was sitting by his side, weeping softly. Then, Eva turned and walked out the door. She did not call a car. She took a taxi to DeLuca Tower. She marched past the doorman, past the concierge who tried to greet her, and into the elevator. She keyed in the code for the penthouse with such force she nearly cracked the plastic button. Nico was in his office. He was on the phone, standing by the window, looking out at the city that was slowly slipping through his fingers. He wore a white dress shirt, the sleeves rolled up, and he looked tired. When the doors burst open, he turned. He saw Eva's face, streaked with tears, pale with fury, and he hung up the phone without saying goodbye. "Eva," he started, taking a step toward her. "You lied to me," Eva screamed. The sound tore through the quiet elegance of the room. She stormed toward him, closing the distance until she was on the other side of his massive ebony desk. She slammed her hands down on the wood, the vibration rattling the crystal tumbler of whiskey sitting there. "You looked me in the face and you promised," Eva yelled, her voice cracking. "You said no one would touch him. You said we were safe." Nico's expression hardened, his jaw setting into a rigid line. "I know what happened. Rafe just called me." "You know what happened?" Eva laughed, a hysterical, jagged sound. "My brother is in a hospital bed. Nico, his face is smashed in. They were waiting for him. Where were your men? Where was this protection you sold me?" "They waited until he was outside the zone," Nico said. his voice low and controlled, though his eyes burned. He skipped the car pickup. He walked. My men cannot protect him if he does not follow the protocol. Do not blame him. Eva shouted, pointing a shaking finger at his chest. He is a child. You are the boss. You are the one who thinks he owns this city. But you cannot even stop a thug like Rossi from beating up a teenager in broad daylight. You are useless. Nico's nostrils flared. He walked around the desk, moving with the stalking grace of a predator. He did not stop until he was towering over her. You think I am useless, he growled. If it were not for me, Eva, your brother would be dead. Rossi wanted to send a message. If I had not put the word out that you were under my protection, they would not have used fists. They would have used bullets. He is alive because I exist. I do not care, Eva cried, tears spilling over her lashes again. I do not care about your influence or your wars. I care that I trusted you. I let you drag me into this world because I thought you could keep the monsters away. But you are just another monster. Nico, you are all the same. You use people like us as leverage, as pawns, and when we get hurt, you just call it business. I have never used you as a pawn, Nico said, his voice dropping to a rough whisper. Then let me go, Eva sobbed, her anger giving way to a crushing exhaustion. She wrapped her arms around herself, shaking. I am so tired, Nico. I am tired of being scared every time my phone rings. I am tired of looking over my shoulder. I am tired of being powerless. She looked up at him, her eyes swimming with grief and something else, something terrified and vulnerable. And I am tired of pretending, she whispered. Nico went still. Pretending what? I am tired of pretending that I hate you, Eva admitted, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. I am tired of pretending that when you look at me, I do not feel safe, even when I know I should be running. I hate that I look for you when I walk into a room. I hate that you are the danger and the only thing that makes me feel brave. The silence that followed was heavy, thick with the truth that had been haunting the penthouse for months. Nico stared at her. The anger in his eyes dissolved, replaced by a raw, naked hunger. He saw her, not the maid, not the problem to be solved, but the woman who stood up to him when no one else dared. The woman who made him feel human in a life that demanded he be a machine. He took a step closer. Eva did not back away. She stood her ground, her breath hitching in her throat. Nico reached out. He cupped her face in his large hands, his palms warm against her tear-stained cheeks. His thumbs brushed away the wetness, his touch incredibly gentle for a man capable of so much violence. You do not have to pretend, he murmured, his voice vibrating through her skin. Not with me. He leaned down, pressing his forehead against hers. Eva closed her eyes, a shudder running through her body. She could smell him, soap, scotch, and the clean scent of rain. She could feel the heat radiating from him, enveloping her. I should leave, Eva whispered, though her hands rose of their own accord, clutching the front of his shirt. You should, Nico agreed, his breath ghosting over her lips, but you are not going to... He tilted her head back, his eyes searching hers for one last second of permission. When he saw the surrender in her gaze, he closed the distance. The kiss was slow at first, a tentative exploration of boundaries being crossed. His lips were firm, warm, and demanding. Eva let out a soft sound, a whimper of relief and longing, and opened to him. The moment their lips met, the dam broke. Nico groaned low in his throat, his arms wrapping around her waist, pulling her flush against him. Eva buried her hands in his hair, pulling him closer, desperate to bridge the gap between their worlds. It was a kiss of desperation, of fear, and of a love that had grown in the cracks of a broken sidewalk. He tasted like whiskey and danger. She tasted like tears and rain. Nico walked her backward until her back hit the wall, never breaking the kiss. He lifted her easily, his hands sliding down to her hips, anchoring her against him. Eva wrapped her legs around his waist, needing to be closer, needing to disappear into him. Nico broke the kiss to bury his face in the crook of her neck, inhaling sharply. You have no idea, he rasped against her skin. How long I have wanted to do this. Since the $20, Ava breathed, her head falling back. Since the first day you refused to look me in the eye, Nico corrected. He captured her mouth again, deeper this time, consuming her. The anger of the argument was transmuted into passion, a fierce, burning need to claim and be claimed. Nico carried her out of the office, kicking the door of his bedroom open. The room was dark, lit only by the city lights filtering through the sheer curtains. He lowered her onto the bed, following her down, his weight a heavy, grounding presence. The door clicked shut, sealing them in a world where the Rossi crew, the debts, and the danger could not reach them. For tonight, there was no war. There was only this. The next morning, the sun broke over Eastbridge in a wash of pale, wintry gold. It filtered through the heavy curtains of the master bedroom, painting stripes of light across the duvet. Eva woke slowly. For a moment, she forgot where she was. She reached out, expecting the cold side of her twin bed in the staff quarters. Instead, her hand brushed warm skin. She froze, the memories of the night crashing back into her mind. She turned her head. Nico was asleep beside her, one arm thrown over his eyes. In sleep, the hard lines of his face were smoothed out. He looked younger. He looked peaceful. Eva sat up, pulling the sheet around her. She should feel regret. She should feel shame. She had slept with her boss, the man who was arguably the cause of her family's misery, but she did not feel shame. She felt a strange, quiet calm. She slipped out of bed and padded to the kitchen. She made coffee, the routine grounding her. When she turned around, Nico was standing in the doorway. He was wearing sweatpants, his chest bare, his hair messy. He did not say anything. He just walked over to her, took the mug from her hand, set it on the counter, and pulled her into a hug. He buried his face in her hair, holding her tight. "Good morning," he mumbled into her neck. "Good morning," Eva replied, her arms wrapping around his waist. They ate breakfast at the island, eggs and toast. Simple food for a complicated morning. It was domestic. It was normal. And that made it terrifying. Before he left for the office, Eva found herself standing in front of him in the foyer. He was dressed in his suit, the armor back in place. "Your tie is crooked," she said softly. Nico stood still, watching her as she reached up. Her deft fingers undid the knot and retied it, smoothing the silk against his throat. When she finished, she flattened her hands against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. She blushed, remembering the feeling of that same heart beating against her naked skin hours before. Nico caught her hand and kissed her palm. "Thank you," he said, and he meant it for more than just the tie. In the weeks that followed, the dynamic in the penthouse shifted. Ava was no longer just the housekeeper or the assistant. She was a partner, albeit a silent one. Nico began to trust her with more than just his schedule. He brought her files, stacks of paperwork for his legitimate real estate holdings and the shipping logistics. "You have a head for numbers," he told her one evening. "Use it. Check these contracts. Find the waste." Eva felt a surge of pride. She had always been good at math, always dreamed of running her own business. Now, she was helping manage a multi-million-dollar empire. She set up a workspace in the library, diving into the ledgers with the same intensity she used to scrub floors. She found errors. She found overcharges. She saved him thousands of dollars in the first week alone. Nico praised her, his eyes shining with a respect that made her chest swell. But as she dug deeper, the pride began to curdle. It started with a series of invoices from a consulting firm called North Star Solutions. $10,000 here, $50,000 there. Regular payments every month for security consultation. Eva looked up the firm. It did not exist. The address led to an empty lot in New Jersey. She kept digging. She traced the payments through a series of shell companies, realizing with a sinking heart that the money was flowing in circles. It was washing dirty cash, money from gambling, from protection rackets, maybe even drugs, and turning it into clean real estate profits. The legitimate business she was so proud to be part of was just a mask. It was a beautiful, expensive suit worn over a rotting corpse. She waited until Nico came home that night. He walked in looking pleased, carrying a bottle of wine. "We closed the deal on the waterfront property," he announced, smiling at her. Eva did not smile back. She sat at the library desk, the incriminating files spread out before her. "What is this? Nico?" she asked, holding up a printout. Nico's smile faded. He walked over and glanced at the paper. "That is a ledger. It is a lie," Eva said, her voice trembling. "North Star Solutions. It is a ghost company. You are laundering money through the construction accounts." Nico sighed. Setting the wine bottle down, he did not deny it. He did not look ashamed. He looked resigned. "Eva, put that away." "No," Eva said, standing up. "I thought I was helping you build something real. I thought this side of the business was clean. You told me you were trying to go legitimate." "I am," Nico said, running a hand through his hair. "But you cannot turn an ocean liner on a dime. Eva, it takes time. The construction projects need cash to start. The banks will not lend to me because of my name, so I use the other money to fund the clean work. Eventually, the clean work will pay for itself, and I can cut the other cords. But for now, this is how the world survives. This is how criminals survive," Eva corrected, feeling betrayed. Nico's eyes flashed. "Do not look at me like that, like I am some common thief. You eat the food this money buys. You live in the building this money built. I never asked for this," Eva cried. "I wanted to clean floors. I wanted an honest wage. You pulled me into this gray world where nothing is right or wrong." Nico laughed bitterly. "There is no such thing as clean money. Eva, every dollar in this city has a little blood on it. Some people just have better soap than others." He walked to the window, staring out at the skyline. "You want to know why I do it?" he asked. His voice quiet. Eva stayed silent, waiting. "My father was a good man," Nico began, or he tried to be. "He ran a small union. He tried to keep the mobs out of the docks. He refused to take their money. He wanted to be clean, just like you." He turned to look at her, his silhouette dark against the city lights. "I was 12 when they came for him. We were walking home from church. A car pulled up. 2 men got out. They did not say a word. They just shot him. 4 times in the chest." Eva gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "He died on the sidewalk," Nico continued, his voice devoid of emotion, which made it all the more terrifying. "I stood there in my Sunday suit, watching his blood run into the gutter. It ruined my shoes. I remember looking at my shoes and thinking how mad my mother would be." He paused, taking a shaky breath. "The police did nothing. The neighbors did nothing. Because they were scared, and I realized then that being good does not save you. Being honest does not save you. Power saves you. Control saves you." He walked back to the desk, leaning his hands on it, looking deep into her eyes. "I took over his small operation. I made deals with the men who killed him, and then, when I was strong enough, I killed them. I built this empire so that no one in my family would ever have to die on a sidewalk again, so that no 12-year-old boy would have to stand in his father's blood." Eva looked at him. She saw the man in the suit, but beneath it, she saw the boy. The terrified, angry boy left alone in a violent world, forced to become a monster to survive. Her anger softened, melting into a profound, aching sadness. She understood him. She understood why he held on so tight, why he needed to control everything. But understanding was not the same as acceptance. She walked around the desk and placed her hand on his arm. He flinched, then relaxed into her touch. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I am so sorry that happened to you." Nico looked down at her, his eyes searching for forgiveness. "But I cannot live like this." "Nico," she said softly. Nico stiffened. "What does that mean?" "It means that I love you," Eva said, the confession slipping out quietly. "But I cannot be part of this. I cannot look at these numbers and pretend they are not crimes. I cannot wait for the day when Marco gets hurt again, or when you do not come home at all." She stepped back, putting space between them. "When Marco is healed, when the doctors say he is cleared, we are leaving." Nico's face went cold. "Leaving?" "Yes. I am taking him and my mother, and we are going, not to Ohio, somewhere else. Somewhere you cannot find us. "You think I will let you go?" Nico asked, his voice dropping to a dangerous frequency. "You have to," Ava said. "I am not asking for money. I am not asking for a severance package. I am leaving without a cent of your money. No notes, no goodbyes. Just gone." She turned to leave the library, unable to bear the look in his eyes. Eva. She stopped at the door but did not turn around. Nico's voice carried across the room, heavy with threat and desperation. "You can leave my buildings. Ava, you can leave your job, but do not think you can just walk out of my life for free." Eva closed her eyes, a single tear tracking down her cheek. "I have to try," she whispered. She walked out, leaving him alone in the room full of lies and money, the silence stretching between them like a funeral shroud. The collapse of the DeLuca Empire did not happen with a bang. It did not happen with an explosion or a dramatic shootout in the streets. It happened with a phone call at 3 a.m, a quiet, devastating sound that shattered the silence of the penthouse. Nico was in his office, as he always was these days, surrounded by the glowing screens of his monitors. Eva was asleep in his bedroom, a temporary peace she had only just accepted. When the phone rang, Nico picked it up on the first ring. "It is done," a voice said. It was not one of his captains. It was a federal agent he had on his payroll, a man whose children's college tuition Nico had paid for the last 4 years. "What is done?" Nico asked, his voice tight with sleep and suspicion. "The warrants," the agent whispered, rushing the words. "They are signed. RICO charges, money laundering, conspiracy. They have the ledgers. Nico, they have everything." Nico felt the blood turn to ice in his veins. The ledgers were encrypted. They were stored on offline servers that only 2 people could access, himself and Adrian Costa. Adrian, his consigliere, his right hand, the man who had stood beside him at his father's funeral, the man who had toasted to loyalty at every Christmas dinner for the last 20 years. "Where did they get the ledgers?" Nico demanded, though he already knew. Costa gave them up, the agent confirmed, sealing the betrayal. He cut a deal, full immunity and a relocation package in exchange for your head on a platter. And Nico? He did not just give them to us. He gave copies to the Rossi crew. He sold you to the law and the wolves at the same time. Get out, now. The line went dead. For a moment, Nico sat paralyzed. The betrayal was a physical blow, a knife twisting in his gut. Adrian had not just stolen money. He had stolen the foundation of Nico's life. He had sold out the family he swore to protect for a safer life in the suburbs. Then, the survival instinct kicked in. Nico moved. He woke Ava not with a gentle touch, but by throwing the bedroom lights on. "Get up," he commanded, stripping off his sleeping shirt and grabbing a tactical vest from the back of the closet. Ava sat up, blinking against the harsh light. "Nico? What is happening?" "We are compromised," Nico said, his voice devoid of emotion. Adrian turned. "The feds are coming." "The Rossi crew is coming. We have to move." Eva scrambled out of bed, her heart hammering. She watched as Nico moved through the room with terrifying efficiency. He was not packing clothes. He was packing cash, passports, and hard drives. He looked at the monitors on the wall. Red lights were flashing across the logistics map. "My trucks," Nico muttered, watching the GPS trackers go dark one by one. "They are hijacking the trucks." It was a coordinated strike. While the police prepared to raid his offices, the Rossi crew was stripping his assets on the highway. His accounts were likely already frozen. His credit lines burned. In the span of an hour, Nico DeLuca went from the king of Eastbridge to a man standing in the ruins of his castle. Eva dressed quickly, pulling on jeans and a heavy sweater. She watched him. He looked different. The polished, untouchable aura was gone. He was unshaven, his eyes wild with adrenaline, his movements jerky. He looked like the 12-year-old boy he had told her about, trying to hold back a tide of blood with his bare hands. And yet, amidst the chaos, he stopped. He turned to her, walking over to check the clasp of her coat. "Stay close to me," he said, his voice rough. "Rafe is bringing the car around back. We are going to the safe house in Jersey." "What about my mother?" Eva asked, panic rising in her throat. "What about Marco?" "I sent a team for them. Nico promised. They will meet us there." But as they rushed down the service elevator, dodging the sound of sirens wailing in the distance. Eva felt a cold seed of doubt take root in her stomach. She watched Nico on his burner phone, barking orders to men who were not answering. She saw the frustration etching deep lines into his face. He was losing. The great Nico DeLuca was losing, and if he fell, he would take everyone near him down into the crater. They made it to a temporary safe house, a grim basement apartment in the industrial district, far from the luxury of the tower. Rafe stood guard at the door, his face grim. The news on the small television in the corner showed footage of federal agents carrying boxes out of DeLuca Tower. Nico sat at the rusted kitchen table, his head in his hands. He had not shaved in 2 days. His shirt was wrinkled. He looked exhausted, stripped of the armor of his wealth and control. Eva made coffee in a cracked pot. She placed a cup in front of him. He looked up, his eyes bloodshot. "Thank you." He reached for her hand, squeezing it. "I will fix this. Eva, I promise. I just need time to liquidate the offshore assets. I can buy our way out of this." Eva looked at him, and for the first time, she saw the lie. He could not buy his way out. The money was gone. The power was gone. All that was left was the violence. She pulled her hand away gently. "Drink your coffee, Nico." That night, while Nico slept a fitful, restless sleep on the lumpy sofa, his hand resting near the gun on the floor, Eva made a choice. She looked at him. She loved him. God help her. She loved him. She loved the way he tried to protect her, even now when he had nothing left to give. She loved the vulnerability he hid from the world. But love was not enough to stop a bullet. If she stayed, she would be leverage. Luca Rossi knew who she was. He knew about Marco. As long as she was by Nico's side, she was a target, and her family was a target, and Nico would burn the world down to keep her. Even if it meant destroying himself in the process, she had to save them. She had to save him from having to choose between his survival and hers. She moved silently. She packed a single backpack. She took nothing he had bought her, no jewelry, no expensive clothes. She took her old jeans, her worn coat, and her documents. She went to the kitchen counter. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a $5 bill. It was the only cash she had left from her old life, the life before the silk dresses and the blood-stained marble. She smoothed the bill out on the table. It looked small and pathetic against the peeling laminate. She found a notepad and a pen. Her hand shook as she wrote, "This time, it is not about money. You do not owe me, and I do not owe you. Please, do not come after me. Save yourself. E." She placed the note under the bill. She looked at Nico one last time, memorizing the curve of his jaw, the way his dark lashes rested against his cheek. She wanted to kiss him goodbye, but she knew if she touched him, she would never leave. "Goodbye, Nico," she whispered into the darkness. She slipped out the back door, past a sleeping Rafe who was exhausted from a double shift, and disappeared into the cold, pre-dawn mist of the city. She did not go to the Jersey safe house. She went to the one place she knew Rafe had not secured yet, the old bus terminal on the south side. She had called her mother from a payphone, telling her to meet her there, to bring Marco, to run. Nico woke up 2 hours later. The silence in the apartment was heavy. "Wrong. Ava," he called out, sitting up. There was no answer. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced his chest. He checked the bathroom, empty. He checked the bedroom, empty. He ran to the kitchen, there, on the table. Sat the $5 bill. Nico froze. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. He walked forward slowly, as if approaching a bomb. He picked up the bill. He read the note. "You do not owe me, and I do not owe you." He stared at the money. $5. The first time she had left it, he had felt insulted. He had felt like she was cheapening him. But this time, it felt like a knife to the heart. It was not an insult. It was a release. She was setting him free. She was telling him that she wanted nothing from him. Not his protection, not his money, not his love. She had seen him at his lowest, stripped of his empire, and she had decided that he was not enough. Or perhaps she had decided that she was too much of a burden. Nico crushed the note in his fist, a roar built in his chest, a primal sound of loss and fury. He felt truly broke. The millions in the seized accounts meant nothing. This $5 bill and the empty space where she should be was the only poverty that mattered. He slammed his fist into the wall. The plaster cracked. Pain shot up his arm, grounding him. He turned to Rafe, who had just rushed in. Wide-eyed. "She is gone." Nico snarled. "Find her, now." The bus terminal was a cavernous, echoing space that smelled of diesel fumes and stale pretzels. Eva huddled on a wooden bench, her mother on one side, Marco on the other. They had tickets to a small town in Wyoming. It was as far as the money would take them. "The bus is boarding in 10 minutes, Eva said, checking her watch. Just 10 minutes. She felt exposed. Every time a door opened, she flinched, expecting to see Nico storming in to drag her back. But it was not Nico who came. A black SUV screeched to a halt at the curb outside the glass doors. 3 men jumped out. They were not wearing the tailored suits of the DeLuca organization. They wore leather jackets and jeans. Eva recognized the man in the lead. It was the man with the scar who had smirked at her at the gala. One of Rossi's lieutenants. "Run," Eva whispered, grabbing Marco's arm, but there was nowhere to run. The men moved with terrifying speed. They burst through the doors, ignoring the security guard who shouted at them. "There!" The scar-faced man pointed. Eva shoved Marco toward the boarding gate. "Go! Get on the bus!" She turned to block the men, screaming for help. "Help! Police!" But the terminal was mostly empty, and the few people there scattered at the sight of guns being drawn. The scar-faced man grabbed Eva by the hair. She screamed, clawing at his face, kicking at his shins. She fought with the desperation of a cornered animal. She landed a solid kick to his knee, making him grunt, but another man grabbed her from behind, pinning her arms. "Marco!" Eva screamed as she saw her brother hesitate. Looking back, "Run!" A third man struck misses. Morales, it was a casual, brutal backhand. Eva's mother crumpled to the dirty floor. Unconscious. "No!" Eva shrieked. "Mama!" Marco lunged forward to help his mother, but the third man grabbed him by the collar and pistol-whipped him, dragging his limp body toward the door. Eva was lifted off her feet. She thrashed, biting the hand that covered her mouth, tasting leather and salt, but they were too strong. They dragged her out into the cold air, throwing her into the back of the SUV next to Marco. The last thing she saw before the door slammed shut was her mother lying still on the terminal floor, a lone figure amidst the scattered luggage. The SUV sped away, merging into the traffic, disappearing into the belly of the city. Nico was in the car, driving aimlessly. When his phone rang, it was not Rafe. It was a number he did not recognize. He answered it, his hand gripping the steering wheel so hard the leather creaked. "Speak!" "Nico," a voice purred. It was Luca Rossi. Nico pulled the car over to the curb, his heart stopping. "Luca, I hear you're having a bad week," Luca said pleasantly. "Accounts frozen, trucks missing, tough break, but I found something of yours that you might want back." Nico stopped breathing. From the background of the call came a sound that tore his soul apart. It was a muffled, terrified sob. Then a voice, screaming through a gag. "Nico, don't—" The voice was cut off by the sound of a slap. "Eva," Nico whispered, the name a prayer and a curse. "She is feisty," Luca laughed. "I like that. The maid cleans up nice." "Nico, I can see why you kept her around. If you touch her," Nico said, his voice deadly quiet, "I will peel the skin from your bones." "Scary," Luca mocked, "but you are in no position to make threats. You are broke. Nico, you have no men. You have no money. You have nothing. I have enough," Nico said. "Here is the deal," Luca said, his tone shifting to business. "I want the shipping routes. All of them. I want the deeds to the waterfront warehouses signed over to me, and I want you to leave Eastbridge. Tonight, you give me the city, and I give you the girl." "And the boy?" Nico asked. "Sure. The boy, too. He's bleeding on my upholstery. But he is alive." "Where?" Nico asked. "I will send you the coordinates. You come alone. If I see one cop, one Fed, or one of your leftover goons, I return her to you in pieces. Do we have a deal?" Nico looked out the windshield. He saw a billboard for DeLuca shipping. faded and peeling. He looked at his hands, empty. "Send the location," Nico said. He hung up. He sat there for a moment in the silence of the car. He had built an empire to protect his family. He had amassed millions of dollars to ensure safety. And in the end, it was his greed, his need to own the city, and his arrogance in thinking he could control Ava's life that had led her to this. He had tried to lock her in a tower to keep her safe, but the tower had collapsed, and she was in the rubble. He checked the clip of his gun. He had 12 rounds, he had Rafe, and he had a few favors left to call in, men who valued blood over money. He did not have an empire anymore. He did not have a fortune. But as he put the car in gear, his eyes cold and focused, he realized he was more dangerous than he had ever been, because now he had nothing left to lose except her. Ava woke up in darkness. Her head throbbed. Her wrists were bound behind her back with zip ties that cut into her skin. She was seated in a chair. She could feel the cold metal against her back. She blinked, her eyes adjusting to the gloom. It was a warehouse. She knew the smell instantly. It was a cocktail of old diesel, rusting iron, and a specific acrid chemical cleaner, trichlor. She had used it once to clean an industrial garage. It was strong, cheap, and illegal in most parts of the city. She listened. Somewhere in the distance, she heard the rhythmic clatter of wheels on tracks, a train, but not a passenger train. It was slow, heavy, a freight train. Wait. She closed her eyes, focusing. The train sounded close, but muffled, and there was an echo, a slapback delay. They were near the tracks, but the sound was bouncing off something large. Water? No. Metal? She sniffed the air again. Beneath the chemicals, there was a faint scent of grain, rotting grain, the old silos. She opened her eyes. She was in the abandoned granary district near the freight yards. Specifically, the old Miller warehouse. She knew it because she had interviewed for a cleaning job there 2 years ago before it was condemned. She looked to her left. Marco was tied to a pillar a few feet away. He was conscious, his face pale and terrified, watching the men guarding the door. "Marco," Eva whispered. He looked at her, tears welling in his eyes. "Eva, I'm sorry." "Shh," Eva said softly. "It is okay. We're going to die, aren't we?" Marco whimpered. "No," Eva said, her voice firm despite her own terror. "We are not." She thought of Nico. She thought of the note she had left. She thought of how she had hurt him to save him. He would come. She knew it in her bones. He would not let this stand. She remembered the gala. She remembered the way his hand had trembled on her back when they danced. It wasn't weakness. It was restraint. It was the suppression of a force so powerful it frightened him. She had spent so much time running from him, running from the fact that he was a criminal, running from the fact that he had bought her. But in the dark of this warehouse, facing the end, the truth was clear. He was the only man who had ever really seen her, and she was the only one who had ever seen him. "If I get out of here," Eva vowed silently, twisting her wrists against the plastic ties, testing their strength. "I am done running." She looked at the floor near her chair. There was a jagged piece of rusted metal, a remnant of some old machinery. It was just out of reach of her foot. She scooted the chair, inch by inch. The metal scraped against the concrete. One of the guards looked over. "Hey, sit still." Eva froze. The guard turned back to his phone. She waited a beat, then moved again. She reached the metal with her heel. She began to drag it closer, slowly, silently. She would not wait for a savior. She would not wait to be rescued. She was Eva Morales. She had cleaned up other people's messes her whole life. It was time to clean up her own. She managed to hook the metal with the toe of her sneaker and flick it behind the chair. She reached down with her bound hands, her fingers brushing the sharp, rusty edge. She began to saw at the plastic. "Hold on, Marco," she whispered. "Just hold on." The recording of Luca Rossi's call played on a loop in the silence of the car, a digital specter haunting the cramped interior. Nico sat hunched over the dashboard, his eyes closed, listening not to the taunts of his enemy, but to the background noise. He isolated the sounds, stripping away Luca's voice in his mind until he heard the faint, rhythmic chugging of a diesel engine and the low, mournful blast of a horn. It was a train, but not a commuter line. It was heavy freight, moving slow. Nico opened his eyes, staring at the map spread out on the passenger seat. He traced the rail lines with a finger that still had motor oil under the nail from checking his own engine. The sound had a specific echo, a slapback delay that only happened when sound waves hit corrugated steel and bounced back instantly. He remembered a conversation from months ago. Eva had been organizing his files, complaining about a previous job interview where the foreman had tried to underpay her. She had mentioned the Miller warehouse near the old freight yards, describing how the smell of industrial solvent was so strong it made her dizzy. The Miller warehouse. It had been a DeLuca property 30 years ago, before his father was killed. It sat right next to the switchyard where the freight train slowed down to change tracks. Nico looked at the GPS tracker for his stolen trucks. They had vanished off the grid 3 miles from that location. It was the perfect staging ground, isolated, loud enough to cover screams, and symbolic enough for Luca to enjoy the irony. He had the location. Now he needed an army, but he had no army left. His captains were either arrested or in hiding. His accounts were frozen. He was one man with a gun and a bodyguard. Nico picked up his phone. He dialed a number he had memorized but never intended to call. "Agent Thorne," Nico said when the line clicked open. There was a pause on the other end. "You have a lot of nerve calling me. DeLuca. We have a warrant for your arrest. We are tearing your office apart as we speak." "I know," Nico said, his voice steady, "but you want the Rossi crew more than you want me. I can give you Luca. I can give you his entire leadership structure. Tonight, I am listening," Thorne said, the skepticism dripping from his voice. "I am going to tell you where they are," Nico said, "and you are going to wait 5 minutes before you breach. You are going to give me 5 minutes to get my people out. After that, you can have the credit, the bust, and the promotion." "And what do you get?" Thorne asked. "I get to walk away," Nico said, "not from the charges, just from the warehouse." Thorne was silent for a long beat. Nico held his breath. He was trading his freedom for a chance to save her. If Thorne agreed, Nico would likely still go to prison eventually, but Eva would be alive. "Done," Thorne said. "Send the coordinates." The Miller warehouse loomed against the night sky like a rusting beast. It was a massive structure of corrugated metal and shattered windows, surrounded by overgrown weeds and the skeletal remains of old shipping containers. Nico and Rafe moved through the shadows of the train yard, using the noise of the idling locomotives to mask their footsteps. They were alone. 2 men against an entire crew. Nico checked his weapon. He had 15 rounds in the magazine and 1 in the chamber. He had a spare clip in his pocket. It was not enough. It had to be enough. He looked at Rafe. "You go to the east entrance," Nico whispered. "Make noise. Draw their fire. I'm going in through the loading dock." Rafe nodded, his face grim. "Get her out, boss." Nico moved toward the dark maw of the loading bay. His heart was not pounding. It was a cold, heavy weight in his chest. He had spent his life building walls of money and power to keep himself safe, to keep his heart untouchable. But as he crept toward the woman who had dismantled those walls with nothing but a $5 bill and a stubborn refusal to be owned, he realized that safety was a lie. The only truth was her, inside the warehouse. The air was thick with dust and the chemical stench Eva had remembered. She was tied to a metal chair in the center of the main floor, under the glare of a single hanging work light. Marco was slumped against a pillar nearby, exhausted and terrified, his eyes squeezed shut. Luca Rossi was pacing in front of her, holding a gun loosely in his hand. He looked at his watch, then at the door. "He is late," Luca sneered. "Maybe he does not love you as much as I thought. Maybe he is halfway to Mexico with whatever cash he could stuff in his pockets." "He will come," Eva said. Her voice was raspy, her throat dry, but her chin was high. Luca laughed and walked away to talk to one of his men near the entrance. Eva took the opportunity. She reached behind the chair, her fingers scrabbling for the jagged piece of rusted metal she had kicked into place earlier. She found it. She gripped the metal shard, pressing the sharp edge against the thick plastic of the zip ties binding her wrists. She began to saw. The rust bit into her skin. She felt the warm trickle of blood run down her palms, but she did not stop. She gritted her teeth, using the pain to focus. Saw, twist, saw, twist. The plastic groaned. It was weakening. "Marco," she whispered, barely moving her lips. "Marco, listen to me." Marco opened his eyes. "When I get loose," Eva whispered, "I am going to cause a distraction. You run. You hide behind those crates over there. Do not look back. Do not try to help me. Just hide. I cannot leave you." Marco whimpered. "You have to," Eva commanded softly. She gave one final, desperate yank on her bonds. The plastic snapped. Her hands were free. She kept them behind her back, holding the pose. She waited. She watched Luca turn around, a cruel smile on his face. "Time is up, sweetheart," Luca said, raising his gun. "I guess I will start sending pieces to—" The explosion of glass shattered the sentence. A window on the east side of the warehouse blew inward, followed instantly by the crack of gunfire. Rafe had started the party. Luca spun around, shouting orders. "Get over there! Kill them!" His men scattered, running toward the east wall, firing blindly into the dark. "Now!" Eva screamed. She launched herself from the chair. She grabbed the metal chair itself, swinging it with all her strength at the nearest guard. It connected with his knees, sending him crashing to the ground. "Run! Marco!" Marco scrambled up and bolted for the stack of crates. Eva dove behind a rusted industrial cleaning cart just as bullets began to chew up the concrete where she had been sitting. "Nico!" she screamed, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Nico! Eva!" The answer came from the west. Nico burst through the shadows of the loading dock, a dark, avenging angel. He moved with terrifying precision. He fired 2 shots, dropping the guard who was raising his weapon at Eva. He did not take cover. He ran straight into the kill box, his eyes scanning the room until they locked on the cleaning cart. "Stay down," Nico roared, firing at a gunman on the catwalk. The warehouse erupted into a cacophony of noise. Gunfire echoed off the metal walls, amplifying into a deafening roar. Dust and rust rained down from the ceiling. Nico reached the cart. He slid behind it, crouching next to Eva. He looked at her. He saw the blood on her wrists, the dirt on her face, and the fierce, unyielding fire in her eyes. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, grabbing her hands to check the wounds. "I'm fine," Eva gasped, adrenaline trembling in her voice. "Marco is safe. He's hiding." Nico nodded. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a pocket knife. He grabbed her arm, not roughly but with urgent speed, and sliced the remaining loop of plastic hanging from her wrist. She stumbled forward into his chest, her legs finally giving out. Nico caught her. He dropped his gun for a split second to wrap his arms around her, pulling her into him so tight it knocked the wind out of her. He buried his face in her neck, breathing in the scent of dust and rain and life. "I got you," he whispered, his voice rough with a relief so profound it sounded like pain. "I got you." He pulled back, framing her face in his hands, ignoring the bullets pinging off the metal cart behind them. "I told you," he said, his eyes burning into hers. "You're not leaving me broke." Eva let out a sob that was half laugh, half cry. She reached up, grabbing his collar, and pulled him down. She pressed her lips to his in a kiss that tasted of salt and survival. It was quick, desperate, and sealed a promise that words could never hold. "We have to go," Nico said, breaking the kiss. "The feds are 2 minutes out." They turned to run toward Marco's hiding spot, but a figure stepped out from the shadows, blocking their path. Luca Rossi. He was bleeding from a graze on his shoulder, and his eyes were wild with hate. He leveled his pistol at Eva's chest. "It ends here." "DeLuca!" Luca screamed. Nico did not hesitate. He stepped in front of Eva, spreading his arms. He had no clear shot. He was the shield. "No!" Eva screamed. She refused to watch him die. She refused to be the reason he fell. She looked at the heavy industrial cleaning cart beside them, the symbol of her old life, the tool of her trade. It was loaded with heavy jugs of solvent. With a primal scream, Eva threw her shoulder into the cart. She shoved it with every ounce of strength she had. The cart rolled on its rusted wheels, gathering speed. It slammed into Luca's side just as he pulled the trigger. The shot went wild, sparking harmlessly off a steel beam. Luca grunted, knocked off balance by the heavy impact. Before he could recover, the warehouse doors burst open. Federal agents, drop your weapons! Blue lights flooded the space, blinding and chaotic. SWAT teams poured in from every entrance. Luca looked around, realized he was done, and dropped his gun, raising his hands in defeat. Nico lowered his own weapon, kicking it away across the floor. He turned to Eva. He checked her for bullet holes. When he found none, he pulled her into his arms again, and this time, he did not let go until the agents physically pulled them apart. The fall of the DeLuca Empire was swift and absolute. Nico spent 3 days in a federal holding cell. He was interrogated for hours on end, but Agent Thorne kept his word. The evidence provided against the Rossi crew was so overwhelming, so complete, that Luca and his entire organization were indicted on charges that would put them away for life. Nico, however, had lost his leverage. The government seized everything. The accounts were drained, the trucks were impounded, DeLuca Tower was seized as assets of a criminal enterprise, but they could not pin the murders on him. The witnesses were too scared or too dead, and the ledgers Adrian had stolen were inadmissible due to the illegal nature of their acquisition by the Rossi crew. Nico walked out of the federal building a free man, but he walked out with nothing. His suit was wrinkled. His wallet was empty. His name was Mud. He stood on the steps, squinting in the sunlight, wondering where a king goes when he has lost his kingdom. A cheap sedan pulled up to the curb. The window rolled down. Eva was in the driver's seat. She looked tired, but she was smiling. "Get in," she said. Nico got in. 6 months later, the bank manager looked at the paperwork, then at the couple sitting across from him. He adjusted his glasses. "Mr. DeLuca," he said nervously. "It is. Unusual to see you here for a small business loan. It is just Nico," Nico said quietly. He was wearing a simple button-down shirt and slacks. No jacket, no tie. "And this is not for me. It is for Miss Morales." The manager looked at Eva. "Bright Start Cleaning?" "That is right," Eva said, her voice steady. "Commercial and residential. I have 3 contracts lined up already. I just need the capital for the van and the supplies." The manager looked at the credit scores. Eva's was fair. Nico's was non-existent, his assets frozen or liquidated, but he had co-signed. "Everything looks to be in order," the manager said, stamping the document. "Congratulations." Eva beamed. She took the pen to sign her name. Her hand brushed Nico's on the desk. He flinched, not from pain, but from a sudden, sharp shyness. He looked at her. His eyes, once hard and cold as obsidian, softened. He watched her sign the paper that would build her own empire, 1 bucket at a time. He had never been prouder of anything in his life. Their new home was a 3rd-floor walk-up in a neighborhood that was safe, if not fashionable. The floors were creaky wood, not marble. The windows looked out on a street lined with maple trees, not the glittering skyline. The furniture was mismatched. A sofa Eva had found at a thrift store, a table Nico had repaired himself. Nico stood by the window, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of bruised purple and gold. He had finished his shift at the logistics firm where he now worked as a consultant, a legitimate job, with a boss, a paycheck, and taxes. He heard Eva come up behind him. She wrapped her arms around his waist, leaning her head against his back. "You are home early," she said. "Traffic was light," Nico replied. He placed his hands over hers, interlacing their fingers. He looked at the wall beside the window. There, in a simple wooden frame that he had sanded and stained himself, were 2 crumpled $5 bills. They were smoothed out now, pressed behind the glass. They were not money anymore. They were artifacts, monuments to the war they had fought to get here. Nico laughed softly, a sound that rumbled in his chest. "What?" Eva asked, moving around to stand in front of him. "I was just thinking," Nico said, looking down at her. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. 6 months ago, I owned half the city. I had drivers. I had chefs. I had people who trembled when I walked into a room. "Do you miss it?" Eva asked, searching his face. Nico looked at the framed bills. He looked at the modest apartment, and then he looked at Eva. He wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her flesh against him. He felt the warmth of her skin, the steady beat of her heart, the undeniable reality of her presence. He shook his head. "I used to measure my life in shipping containers and ledger lines," he murmured. "I thought that was what rich meant." He leaned down, pressing a slow, lingering kiss to her temple. His breath was warm on her skin. "I was broke." "Eva," he whispered against her hair. "I was completely empty." He pulled back just enough to look into her eyes, the sunset reflecting in their dark depths. "I do not measure my love in money anymore," Eva whispered, echoing the words she had written on that final note. "Good." Nico smiled, and it was a true smile, one that reached his eyes and stayed there. "Because with you, I am richer than I have ever been." He kissed her as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the room in shadow, leaving only the silhouette of two people and the faint outline of $5 on the wall. No longer a goodbye, but a symbol of a love that survived when everything else was stripped away. Thank you so much for listening to the story. You're not leaving me broke. I hope you enjoyed Nico and Eva's journey from the penthouse to the walk-up. I would love to hear from you. Please leave a comment down below letting me know where you are listening from. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. And if you enjoyed this, please make sure to subscribe to Mafia Romance Stories and share your thoughts in English in the comments section. Your support helps us create more passionate, thrilling stories just for you. Until next time.